To the PAC. The PAC is a group of community volunteers who provide input to the district on a variety of topics. This evening, we have two new PAC members who wish to join with us. I'd like to introduce Catherine Howell. Catherine is a district parent with children in the district at Loudonville, and Peter Gannon. Peter was also a district parent as well and an alum of Shaker High School. So again, we welcome you all to the PAC and are very grateful for your participation. Why don't we get started with this evening here, and let's go to the first slide here, or the second slide actually. And if you have questions, okay, you can submit them to communications@ncolony.org, and we will be getting back to you. Okay, so that's communications@ncolony.org. Either we will get back to you directly, or we will refer the question to the appropriate department. So let's go to the next slide, please. So we are happy to announce that we have started to get our diagnostic testing clinic up and running. And we are starting out, and we hope to have expanded hours. So we have a diagnostic clinic. It's up and running. It's open weekdays from 1 to 5 at Goodrich. So this allows symptomatic students or staff to get a COVID test at this location. So you can get a COVID test. There is no charge. We are using the Quadrant, a saliva-based PCR test to do this work. Just as a point of reference here, please know eating, teeth brushing, mouth washing for a half hour prior to the test. That's an important point to remember. But this avoids you having to go to a pediatrician or to another site and waiting multiple days for the test results. The turnaround can be 24 to 48 hours. And essentially, the goal of this is to actually it's a couple of goals. The goal is to get our students back in school, to avoid the delay in waiting to get a testing appointment and then the subsequent delay in getting testing results, and also to respond to some of the concerns we heard from our capital pediatricians who were being overwhelmed by the demand for testing. So North Colony has this test site. It's located in the Goodrich building. You can contact the testing site, and of course, we're going to post these slides on the website. But the number is 518-785-8591. That is the central office number. You can call the switchboard and request to go to extension 3170, or you can dial in directly. From 4 to 5, we would be best to remember that number to dial in directly at 3170. Right now, we have this diagnostic testing location open from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. In addition, you can also contact Mr. Michael Michaela at the nurse supervisor's office at 518-785-5511. That is at extension 3715, and that is weekdays 7 to 3 p.m. to make an appointment. Now, in order to use this clinic, parents must first register and then create a student profile, and this student profile would be created on the Quadrant website. So we're going to post this email address that you can see here listed on this page. Get that done before you come to the appointment, and the appointment will go very smoothly. It's pretty quick. It's very rapid, and we're very fortunate to be able to provide this service. And thank you, Tabassum. We appreciate that comment. Mr. Michaela, you're on the call here. Thank you, Jen. Appreciate the comment as well. So, Mr. Michaela, do you have anything you want to add about this?
The turnaround time is right now around 24 to 48 hours. We're seeing them actually pretty quickly. We are seeing, there is issues opening up anything brand new with viewing results. So that is something we are refining. We are still hiring. We have about 14 to 15 staff members that we're still training up, and we are scheduling throughout the rest of the year so that we're always beefed up. We are looking eventually to open up weekend hours depending on the need. That time frame would probably be from like a 10 to 1, Saturday and Sunday. That is also something we're looking into the future. Once the results are received by the parent, it's also important to know that making sure you contact your nurse at your building prior to returning to school. They also receive those results, but just making sure there's a communication between the two of you before the student returns.
And yes, and so Catherine, you had a question here. Is it a PCR test, base test? Yes, it is. That is good news. And Brett, I think that's an excellent suggestion to include it as part of COVID updates. So take that into consideration and implement that. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's get to the next part of our meeting here. Okay, and so we're talking about the New York State Culturally Responsive Teaching Framework. So we are at the start of this process, okay, where we are looking to work beginning at the very beginning. So we had the very beginning day with our staff yesterday, or staff development day, where we are really in phase 1, just increasing awareness and understanding. And we're following up with you as our parent constituency tonight. And this, of course, will be recorded and posted on the website. So more about that as we get into it, but I would like to go to the North County mission statement here. And this is a statement that we developed 12 years ago. And we have used it in these PAC meetings. We've used it in our budget presentation, but it is really a cornerstone of the work we do. So when we look at this, this really is an affirmation that North County really has been engaged in the work of providing support to all students throughout its history. And I just like to read the two facets of this. So the first facet is all, highlighted in blue. Students are provided the opportunity and necessary support to engage in relevant, challenging work, which contributes to their academic and social growth and development. So we are looking here to, we're looking to meet the needs of each and every child. And we have boiled this down to the notion that all means all. And that if we're going to provide, we're not just going to provide opportunity to say, here it is, come and get it, but we also realize that the needs of our learners in our school are different. Their differences come from many different realms. And so to help them realize this opportunity, they must be provided the necessary support. So when we look at this mission statement here, mission statements should be more than just fancy wording. And this mission statement is consistently and constantly aspirational. We didn't create it back in 2010 and say, hey, this is great. We're already there. We're already done with it. This is who we are. It is who we are. It is the essence of who we are. How we seek to constantly reflect and look inward and seek to improve our capacity and our ability to address the needs of every child. This is who we are. But as we learn more and as we know more, it is our obligation to be reflective and to become better at the work we do. I started my work in education 49 years ago. And in that work, I really was taking up my family business, which was in the essence of the fact that we are all educators here in the corps, mom, dad, wife, 2 sisters, and now I have a daughter, okay, who is engaged in college teaching. So education is very, very much a part of my life. And I fully believe in the power of education to create opportunity and transform lives. That is the essence of what we do. So when I look at our mission statement, that really is the why of what we're doing. And so then when the state formally released in the spring this framework to us all, it was very logical and it really fit well with our mission statement. So I think when we look at that particular mission statement, that is aspirational. That is our focus. That is what we continually strive toward and to become better at. And we don't hold ourselves up as perfect. We hold ourselves up as constantly evolving and getting better. So we think about what that means. And in the very first part of the framework, which we just began to unpack yesterday with our teachers, and now we're going to present tonight to you, our parent community. The very first part of this framework talks about building a welcoming and affirming community in the schools. And I can't think of what, schools being serving a better and more important need than that. We all know that it is a goal for our students to belong, to be affirmed, okay, regardless of race, gender, background, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or identity. That's important. Students should feel when they come to school that they are welcomed and affirmed, because that is a foundation of their learning. So when I look at this and I look at the framework, I look at the framework as affirming, okay, the work that this district always is geared toward and aspires to. The second part of the statement comes to the very fundamental understanding in education, that education is a people business. It's delivered by people to our students. And so what we work with our staff, our teachers and administrators, we realize that we are all continually and constantly learning. We're part of that larger learning community. We work together. We build our collective capacity in order to provide what is considered a relevant, equitable education for all. So before we begin to build capacity, we have to continue to learn. And so now we are embarking upon the first phase of the implementation plan of the framework, which is basically to find out what is it and what it's saying, unpacking the meaning of it before we begin to look at how are we going to use this framework, which is a framework, it is not a curriculum, to guide policy implementation and actions that we wish to implement in our schools. So let's go to the next slide, please. So I think I can answer the question that you have here, Jennifer, in the chat here. So the question, this slide is entitled, "What is the New York State Department of Education's culturally responsive and sustaining framework?" So here's the timeline. So in 2018, it was issued for the first time, and it was designed to support education stakeholders in developing and implementing policies that educate, there it is, all students, the words that we have in our mission statement, effectively and equitably, giving them what they need to succeed. And the other word that resonates and is significant with our mission statement, as well as provide appropriate supports and services to promote positive student outcomes. So providing equity and giving students what they need to succeed. Now, what really kept the framework from getting fully presented to schools was the fact that we were in a pandemic. So it wasn't until April 2021 that the New York State Board of Regents released the draft framework. And from their wording directly, okay, they stated that it was a call to action for all schools in New York State to develop policies that advance diversity, equity, and inclusion as a priority in their schools. So again, it was that call to action, but they did set up a sequencing and a plan here to make progress toward that. So let's look towards the next slide. So the framework was released in April, and in May of 2021, the Board of Regents followed up by releasing something called a policy on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in this, the Board of Regents stated that the board expects that all school district and institutions of higher education will develop and implement policies and practices that advance diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that they will implement such policies and practices with fidelity and urgency. So they were pretty clear in terms of the direction that we were being directed to go. And I want to make clear here too that in the district, we are doing it, and schools are doing this in New York State, not just because they're being told to do so, but because there is a belief, okay, that, for example, when we look at that first principle in the framework, that when you affirm and when you include and when you make students feel seen, heard, and welcome, then that is a key to achievement, high quality work, challenging work, getting that relevant education that prepares students for the next step, for the world of work, for college, and for life beyond the K-12 education world. In June of 2021, the Board of Regents and the New York State Education Department published a guide for the implementation of the CRS education framework, as well as 6 CRS framework briefs. So the briefs essentially are executive summaries, okay, that highlight the important concepts of the framework. These are here as a resource to educators, administrators, parents, caregivers, community members, and students. So many of you may have gotten that document and said, oh my God, this is 64 pages. How am I going to digest this? Well, we're going to lead us through as a school community, and that includes parents and staff, teachers, faculty, administration. We're going to look at unpacking this and see what it actually means for this year. So there's no need to worry about being overwhelmed all at once. We're going to go bit by bit, one of the 4 principles by principles, to unpack and see what the framework is actually saying and what it is pointing out as a general direction for schools to begin to move toward. So if we take a look at this then, so the New York State Education Department culturally responsive teaching roadmap is organized into 3 action phases. And the action steps are noted for local implementation and customization. So phase 1 is simply raise awareness and support for the culturally responsive sustaining framework. So we are at the beginning of phase 1. We are at the very beginning of phase one, and we are looking at the beginning of the framework, which has those 4 principles, which Ms. Skeels will be outlining for you later. Phase 2 is building capacity. So that's where we begin to look at the organization. How do we begin the process? What do we need to do to build the capacity to implement? And then phase 3 will represent the full implementation of the culturally responsive sustaining framework. So this is the outline here. So right now, I would like to turn the presentation over to Ms. Skeels, my colleague, Ms. Skeels, our Deputy Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Kaur. You shared a lot in your introduction, so I want to go over a few things and then expand on several of the things that you have already said. So we are in phase 1, which is to raise awareness and support for the culturally responsive and sustaining framework. And if you look, this says who is responsible for implementation. NYSED is New York State Education Department. BOCES, Capital Region BOCES, we fall under, local schools and districts, and then other groups. So obviously step 1, publishing it, that was done by NYSED, that was their responsibility. From 1.2 to 1.6 in phase 1, this is where we are. So 1.2, present virtual, which is what we're having right now, or face-to-face sessions that allow participants to unpack the framework, share the framework briefs, which those will be on the resource page. To establish forums and meetings to build understanding. That's some of what we did yesterday with our teachers, unpacking key vocabulary, utilizing electronic communication, and then creating stakeholder-specific materials to introduce the framework. So this is the beginning of the roadmap and phase 1, and that is where we are right now in North Colony. So what have we done for phase 1? So as you saw from Mr. Kaur, the state really accelerated the timeline starting in April of 2021, May of 2021, and June of 2021 when the briefs were published. Now, we all know June is not an easy time to get teachers together to talk about something new. Over the summer is not always the easiest time to get teachers and parents together. So in June, we shared the framework and those corresponding briefs with our administrators and our Board of Education, as we always do when the state is letting us know about new initiatives. We had our administrative meeting to start them with the understanding and just looking at the framework and getting on board with it in July of 21. In September of 2021, just this past September, we had a Board of Education meeting to talk with them about the framework and introduce them to the concepts in the framework. And then very much at the beginning of November, just yesterday, that was our first teacher meeting. It was a district-wide, as you well know, Superintendent's Conference Day. Teachers worked with their building administrators in all the buildings to start looking at the framework for the first time, to unpack it, jump into it, start thinking about it. And then tonight, also November 21, obviously, we're having our first meeting from the PAC. So let's look at the framework, and you can see here what it looks like. They have this great visual from State Ed where they put students at the center of this tree. And you can see from the framework that it has 4 main principles. The first that we're going to be talking about tonight is welcoming and affirming environments. You can see that's up on the left with the little hand with a heart in it. To the right of it, you can see high expectations and rigorous instruction. And again, as Mr. Kaur said, that's kind of been foundational to North Colony for a long time. Below that, we see ongoing professional learning and support. We hope we're always a community of learners. If we're asking our students to learn and grow, we hope that we as adult professionals are learning and growing all the time. And then to the left, under welcoming and affirming, you see inclusive curriculum and assessment. So as we look at our curriculum and as we look at assessments, we look with an eye toward inclusivity. So as Mr. Kaur mentioned earlier, the document itself is 64 pages. It's dense. It's got a lot in it as a framework. Think about what a framework is. It's a blueprint. It's an overview, if you will. So what we're going to do is very intentionally what we did yesterday with our teachers, knowing we had a small amount of time in the morning to work with them, is we're taking it one aspect at a time. So we started with welcoming and affirming environments because, as Mr. Kaur has said, In order to engage in school and in order to be able to progress academically, you have to connect to school. And so we'll start with the environments which are important to all of us. So principle one, a welcoming and affirming environment. I'd first like to have your attention drawn to the green circle, which is from the state document. And it defines 4 key indicators. So first, there's collective responsibility to learn about student cultures and communities so that we know our students, we know their families. There are close relationships with students and families that students and families feel like they belong to the school and we are here as resources. That there are social emotional learning programs. We know that students have to be ready to learn. And we know that probably we've talked more about social emotional health in the last 18 months than we have in a really long time. We know the effects of the pandemic. And we know that kids need to feel safe, not just physically, but they need to feel safe socially. They need to feel safe emotionally in order to engage with work. We all do. And then finally, materials that represent and affirm student identities. So that when we are reading, when we are talking about subjects in school, that there are all different kinds of people who've been successful throughout our history, throughout global history, and that students see all different kinds of examples of whether it's authors or musicians or mathematicians, that all different people have made contributions, and students can see that anybody has the right and should be able to aspire to anything that they want to be. So yesterday when we started with teachers, we started talking about, well, what do we mean by welcoming? And certainly our schools, we hope are welcoming. Obviously, we had wonderful renovations. We have new spaces. We have buildings that are in good condition. All that is part of being welcoming. We have beautiful posters up on the walls. We have colorful buildings. All that's part of welcoming. Teachers' classrooms are decorated. All that's part of welcoming. But what does it mean to go beyond welcoming and get to affirming? That may be a word that we don't use as often. So a welcoming and affirming environment, first and foremost, feels safe. It feels like a place where I can be safe. It's a space where people can find themselves represented and reflected, and where they understand that all people are treated with respect and dignity. And the words we have highlighted in blue throughout, right from our mission statement, these are words that echo throughout the framework, but also harken back to our mission statement as a public school, that everyone is treated with respect and dignity. The environment ensures that all cultural identities, for example, race, ethnicity, age, gender, sexual orientation, disability, language, religion, socioeconomic background, are affirmed, valued, and used as vehicles for teaching and learning so that everybody belongs. This is a school of many, and everybody has their place and everybody can find their passion. That we've always said should be the goal of public education, that by the time you graduate from 12th grade, you have found your thing, whether it was poetry or music, whether it's history, whether it's sports, whatever it is, that you find the place where you feel like you can make a contribution, you feel successful, you feel like this is a place where I enjoy myself and I can also learn and grow. So that could be robotics for one student, it could be music for another, it could be math for somebody else.
I think the important thing here too, and that was excellent, Ms. Skills, but I think the important thing to remember here is affirmation is an important word. And affirmation means I see you, I hear you, I respect you, I accept you for whoever you are. And that's fundamental to what what the welcoming and affirming environment means. So again, I am very proud of the fact that in North County schools that there has always been, in all my 41 years here, I have worked with people who are committed to creating a welcoming and affirming environment. But I do know also that even at this advanced age in life, that I am a learning human who, when I become aware of people and their needs, and also of awareness of what their experience has been, which has not been my experience, that I need to be understanding of that, and that I need to also work hard to make sure that in all aspects of teaching and learning and in maintaining a welcoming and affirming environment, that they do feel affirmed, seen, heard, respected, and valued. So I think that is an important point. Jameis and Jennifer in the chat, Ms. Skills, raised the question about, our timeline here. And I think, these are deep and important topics. So when we look at those 4 pillars, we are going to spend this first year in raising awareness and understanding both in our internal community as well as in our parent community before we move to phase 2 and phase 3.
Excellent, because and I went back to the slide for you, Mr. Kaur, because I'm running the slides. I can't also see the chat, so thank you for letting me know that, Mr. Kaur. So phase 1, raising awareness, getting the framework out there, getting people a chance to read it, look at it, and then, which is closely related, obviously, to phase 2, which is building capacity, which means let's dive in a little bit more deeply, other than just reading it, and really understand what it's asking, what it's thinking about, long before there's work done to decide how we're going to implement this. And see, one of the things I want to say is this is the back and forth. It's kind of like the federal government that we belong to Washington, D.C., but we also have a New York State government. We have a New York State Department of Education that as a public school we answer to, and obviously because we get funding from them, we follow the rules and guidelines. But then there's also the local work that we do with the Board of Education. So there are 2 levels. So the state gives us the framework, the guidance, the direction, and then it's our work as a district to kind of put it into place. How does it make sense? What does it look like in a local context? And that's kind of with everything other than, say, Regents exams, which come directly from the state. So if the state says, hey, we need to be assessing students in math, we're developing math assessments locally all the time. But the state also develops, for example, a Regents exam in math. So it's always kind of a twofold responsibility. So I'm just going to go ahead and advance back here. So welcoming and affirming environments. We spent some time yesterday doing some journaling with teachers and answering some questions and things like that, so we could start to think about what does it look like, what does it sound like, what does it feel like in a classroom. And so we wanted to share this brief video with you. And Mr. Kaur, when I hit play, because I can see you on my screen, if you could give me a thumbs up that you actually hear the audio when it starts, that would be awesome.
Anything else special happened this weekend, friends?
In the pool, I did a cannonball. I know how to swim.
You know how to swim?
I know. I do. Blow bubbles underwater.
You
Me
do?
too.
As human beings, one of the most essential needs we have is the need to belong. In school, children need a sense of belonging to be able to be productive learners. They need to be connected to their fellow students, connected to their teachers, to also be affirmed in who they are in a way that is positive and accepting.
I don't take swimming lessons.
In a belonging classroom, there's a community being explicitly built. The teacher knows each child and things about each of those children that they can mention and draw on.
I pay attention, I listen. I'm really invested in what they tell me. The students feeling loved, students feeling nurtured, students feeling like they have a place at school, they're safe. It activates their brain cells.
What side would you do?
Sense of belonging is one of the most important activators of a child's engagement in learning. Everything about activating a child's cognitive skills begins with activating their social connectedness. The energy for learning is coming from the social connection that children have.
But in the end, we're trying to come up with an agreement.
Excellent. We're not going to comment, question. We're only going to encourage. Because they're culturally and linguistically diverse students, I want to really make sure that we are making them feel connections. all the writing we do in our class, it's very much about them. It helps them, promotes them to find their own voice and to share their stories.
Sometimes people think every Muslim person is a target or is a terrorist.
Thank you, Anissa.
What did this show us about what we are good at as a group?
Working together, because we often argue a lot.
Today, we did an activity that was really designed to get them thinking about how they're going to support each other. I think that reiterating the idea that we're in this together, I think it's hard to find the time, but doing some team building exercises at the beginning of the year and revisiting them can really help illustrate that point.
In a belonging classroom, they have a community that may meet in classroom meetings to problem solve together, to read stories together, to tell successes and accomplishments or important events together. They celebrate like families do, things that each other have done or have experienced.
Let's talk about what we admire about some of our friends.
I admire Jazara because she is so compassionate.
And when we're talking about being compassionate and being supportive of one another, it's to build that deeper connection for everyone, just to feel like this is their school family, this is somewhere they're loved, they're nurtured, they're taken care of, they're valued.
Thank you for speaking.
The community becomes a place where you can bring your emotions, your fears, your needs. You can be honest about what's going on and know that there will be acceptance, support, and love that's available to carry you through.
We all can work together and we all can try to strategize together and create a better pathway for others to be successful. And we can make it fun.
They're working together. They take care of each other, not just personally, but academically.
We're always pushing each other.
So I had to make sure I was unmuted there for a minute. So I'm sorry, Mr. Cord, did you need some?
I was just saying you are unmuted. That was my phone.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I just wanted to share just a personal anecdote before we go on. So yesterday I had the opportunity to be at Blue Creek Elementary School when we were doing this work and watching this video. And I don't know how many families or how many people on the PAC have students who went through Blue Creek, but Kathy Berger, Mrs. Berger, who is a veteran teacher there, and I've known her for a long time because we've both been in the district for a long time. She came up to me at the end and she said, finally, something coming out of state ed that acknowledges what we do. And if you know Blue Creek, it's called a peaceable school. And Kathy was a big teacher leader in that effort to say, we have to take care of the kids first as children. It doesn't mean we don't do academics, because obviously that's what we're here for. But the recognition that the two go hand in hand. And if you think about the last 5 or 10 years of education, it's been new standards, new assessments, higher targets. And nobody was really talking about, wait, are the kids okay? And now we've had this pandemic and we've been talking a lot about, are the kids okay? And suddenly we have the framework coming back and having principle 1 be about the environment. It's the metaphor of the soil. You can plant the plant, but the more fertile and the better the soil is, the better the plant can grow. It's really that simple. And to see somebody like Kathy, who's this fantastic teacher with a big smile saying like, this is so great to see that we're naming this as, yes, this is important, because when kids belong to our classroom, they can share, they can take risks, they feel comfortable making all kinds of efforts to grow as students and as scholars. So one question you might have right now is, does some of this language sound familiar? And we talked a little bit yesterday with the teachers, and some of it may sound more familiar to those of us who are inside education than perhaps parents, but I think some of it you've probably heard before too. And this is where the state is really aligning a lot of the work. So New York State, if you go to the New York State Education website, they have a Department for Social Emotional Learning. And in 2018, again, pre-pandemic, but it's a really good resource, they released something called Social Emotional Learning, Essential for Learning, Essential for Life. And in that, at the very beginning in 2018, it says, as educators, it is our responsibility to navigate the varied and complex causes of educational inequity. So again, there's that blue, equitable education is in our mission statement, and work to close these gaps. We must ensure that all students receive the supports they need to achieve in academics and life and are treated equitably under discipline policies. And again, receive the supports they need. It's something that Mr. Kaur said earlier with our mission statement about the necessary support. We know that. We've all been students ourselves. Some subjects were easier for us. Some things we caught on faster than others. And sometimes we needed a little extra help, and sometimes we could just sail right through. That's the goal of public education. You know, with the state test results, think about the 3 through 8 test results. The state is constantly putting that information out there and showing us the gaps to say, what can we do to try to bring all kids to a level of proficiency? Because we want all students to graduate so that they can have productive lives. So how do we work with students who are struggling? How do we work with students who are excelling? How do we provide what they need? So that language under social emotional learning that becomes part of, I think, Principle 1, the affirming environment, is also part of New York State's social emotional learning. The other part that I think probably sounds, I'm sorry, Mr. Forrest, you were going to say something.
Yeah, Ms. Gills, Brett just put in the chat that some of the audio broke up. Is it Brett, is it okay now? Okay. Yeah, I didn't hear it break up, so I just wanted to make sure that it was okay for everybody else. All right, thank you. Thank you.
So the other piece that I was thinking that parents may be more familiar with, because there was more publicity around the Dignity for All Students Act. That came out in 2012. It was updated in 2017. And if we look at the Dignity for All Students Act, a lot of parents know that this is the act where if your student is in a situation where they are being bullied or harassed, that you and the school has a duty to respond, and you have a right as a parent, obviously, to inquire and get support. So if we look at the sub-bullet first, where it says in quotes, no student shall be subject to harassment or bullying by employers or students on school property or at a school function, nor shall any student be subjected to discrimination based on a person's actual or perceived race, color, weight, national origin, ethnic group, religion, religious practice, disability, sexual orientation, gender, including gender identity or expression, or sex. That's the part of the law that I think most people know, because that defines that bullying and harassment for any of these classes is unacceptable, and no student should have to suffer in a public school in New York State for any of these reasons. But if we look up to the first bullet, the greater part of that law, and it's quite lengthy, talks about in blue regarding instruction in civility, citizenship, and character education, which we've done at North Colony since the dawn of time, by expanding the concepts of tolerance, respect for others, and dignity to include an awareness and sensitivity in the relations of people, including, and again, listing those classes. And I think, again, if we look at what it means to be in an affirming environment, you see the language right there that is very similar to the Dignity for All Students Act. And again, I'm going to quote Mrs. Berger, and if she's listening to the PAC tonight, I want to give her full credit. She said to me, you know, it strikes me, and she's a 20+ year veteran, it strikes me that the framework should be the precursor to the Dignity for All Students Act, because the Dignity for All Students Act feels reactionary. When something happens, these are the things we have to do and we should do. But to take the step back and say, okay, what can we do to try to prevent conflicts between students in the first place? What can we do to limit bullying? What can we do to make sure, as Mr. Kaur said, that every child feels comfortable in his or her own skin? And while the Dignity for All Students in the blue part obviously alluded to that, the framework now starts to help us to think through, how do we do that? How do we make sure that the student who comes in who maybe doesn't speak English as a first language feels comfortable in their school, as you saw in the video? How do we take extra care to think about that? And I think these are practices as a fully inclusive school district that we've done for quite some time. So some of the work with teachers was like, wait, we have a lot of these things. And that's part of what we did yesterday, was like, let's start with what we're already doing and then see what we need to build on. And there are small things we can do. So although we have a nice timeline that Mr. Kaur mentioned, there are also things that we talked about we could start tomorrow. We could make sure that even though we're busy, we're kind of at the classroom door each day, that we're greeting the kids each day as they come in. All these little things that we do, that we make sure we're just doing them much more consistently. Because any one step toward making one kid or one student or one child feel welcomed and comfortable is a step forward for the whole group. Because what we're trying to do is build community. We are neighborhood schools, and people are proud of their neighborhood schools, I think, because they have such a good sense of community. Mr. Kaur, I see you want to say something.
Yes, Ms. Gills, we have a question from Jennifer Karen in the chat here. So was North County not following the Dignity Act? The way you are characterizing it makes me wonder if this was not happening. We were absolutely following the Dignity Act and keeping that in place. I think this was stated here basically, and I think you expressed it very well, Ms. Skills, that Ms. Berger was stating here that it's a little bit of the cart before the horse. This is in schools, continual work and emphasizing some of the concepts and principles expressed in the framework makes the likelihood of dealing with Dignity Act issues less probable. I think, is that a fair assessment? Would you agree?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thanks, Mr. Kaur, for the clarification. Yes, I think what she was saying is, because we've had, and I'm sure if you have elementary school students or your students are older and they've gone through elementary school, you know the assemblies that they have each month in their elementary buildings in the junior high, talking about cooperation is the word of the month, or kindness is the word of the month. So we've had that, and I'm very grateful that we have such a strong tradition of that. We have that undergirding it. And therefore, when DASA came up, we continued on and we built in all the policies that were enlisted. But I think what Mrs. Berger was saying was all of this that's coming out in the framework, all of that, a lot of it is what we were doing. Maybe all schools weren't doing it, but it's that kind of work, that community building that we do throughout our neighborhood schools, that we do within the halls in the middle school, that we do by separating 9 and 10 and 11 and 12. All of those things that people before us in this district put in place that we've carried on, that we think help to live up to that framework. Will we do more? Of course we will, because as Mr. Kaur said from the beginning, we're educators, we're always learning, we're always growing, and we're always trying to aspire to be even better tomorrow than we were today. Thanks, Mr. Kaur. Another piece that you may know about, and this is more perhaps for parents who have high school kids, since we were talking a lot about parents who have elementary students, is the state has, over the last several years, introduced different graduation pathways depending on the age of your child. You may be very familiar with this if they're closing in on junior year. And that has to do with how many Regents exams they take, how many arts classes they take, and the credits and the required sequences that we would have called them back in the day that are required for graduation. So the state has introduced over the last few years with these pathways, different seals that you can get on your diploma. So you can get a CTE endorsement on your diploma. You can get a seal of biliteracy if you have studied a world language and you have fluency in a language other than English. All of these ideas representing the very strengths that our students have. So the state has also introduced a civic readiness endorsement. And what that is, and I've taken their definition here in quotes, it's the ability to make positive difference in public life of our communities through the combination of civic knowledge, skills and actions, mindsets, and experiences. You're probably very aware if you watch our board meetings or follow our social media that we have North Colony Kids Who Care. Each month we recognize a student who's done something to make their school community or their local community a better place. We have amazing kids in this district who are really committed to service. They do incredible projects. You've seen them in the news, you've seen them on our website. And so this seal of civic readiness recognizes that there are some students, as I said before, for some kids it's music, for some kids it's art, for some kids it's robotics, for some kids it's performing acts of service. They're service oriented. This recognizes that. That's a huge strength, right? We all want our community to be served and that we're all helping one another. So civic ready students use their knowledge and skills and mindsets to make decisions and take actions for themselves, their communities, and public good as members of a culturally diverse democratic society.
And I think this is important too, because I mean, if we take a look back at the history and one of the founding parts of our nation, you know, Thomas Jefferson stated that the education was fundamental to the functions of a democracy. And when we look at it, how does civic participation look in schools? Well, it is evident when we have the second grader who organizes activities to bring joy to nursing home residents during the pandemic. It's evident when we have an elementary student at Loudonville organize an activity that he continued throughout middle school and throughout high school to provide hats for children in pediatric cancer units who had lost their hair and were cold in the cold weather. It's evident when we have students organizing at the high school student activities, whether they be activities to provide social experiences for the class, or whether they be activities here such as food pantry, for example, or other meaningful activities that involve them in their community. So all of these, and these are some of the very basic activities that are represented here. Ms. Gills, we have in the couple points in the chat here from Jennifer Karen. You are giving single teachers feedback on the framework. I guess I'm wondering if you have polled the larger, greater workforce to see if this is a common or shared reaction. And Catherine Howell follows up with great question, Jennifer. I was wondering that too. Have teachers been giving the opportunity to anonymously share thoughts and feelings and ideas on these topics? So certainly we would provide teachers opportunities either in person or anonymously if they wish to share any feedback.
They did, Mr. Ford, yesterday, right?
And they did as part of the workshop in a public matter yesterday. And also we did elicit feedback in terms of evaluation as to you know, how the day went for each and every individual. So go ahead.
So we did, to your question, we had a Google survey that faculty filled out after yesterday morning. Yesterday morning's activities, introducing them to the framework, asking them for feedback on how the morning went, where they needed more information, and more questions, where they needed more time, and to give kind of overall feelings and sentiments. And then today we met with all of the principals and we debriefed to find out how they thought their meetings went in each of the 8 buildings, to find out where they thought their faculty was in terms of readiness and understanding. And we solicited a lot of positive feedback. Certainly Some of it is exactly what Mr. Core said earlier. We need some more time. This is a lot. And the very clear message is, yep, we're just dipping our toe in the water. We're just starting. So I did share an anecdote that I had because I had an opportunity to talk with one teacher, but we surveyed all of the teachers in the district. And we also spent this afternoon with our principals to go over that. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Jennifer Karen has another question. Will we be able to see those evaluations? Would be great to understand what their feedback is or questions they might have. Yeah, I certainly can take that under consideration. I can get back to you on that.
So one other piece that, again, and this is a little bit more on the internal world, is like, does some of this seem familiar? And this is where I think the state is really triangulating in the work that they're doing. So in addition to the framework, in addition to the social emotional learning, in addition to the civic readiness pathway, we also have like the New York State Code of Ethics for Educators. And if we look at some of these, which predate this work, and I won't read them all to you, but I can go down to the ones where there's some blue highlights. You can see in here the threads of things that are in the framework, that New York State educators respect the inherent dignity and worth of each individual, of course. That educators help students to value their own identity, to learn more about their cultural heritage, and practice social and civic responsibilities, as we've already spoken to. They help students to reflect on their own learning and connect it to their life experience. They engage students in activities that encourage diverse approaches and solutions to issues while providing a range of ways for students to demonstrate their abilities and learning. So all of these, it seems, as we start to kind of dig in to the framework, show the framework as fitting into a larger direction that New York State Department of Education is giving to all of the schools throughout all the school districts, I should say, throughout the state. The state has created, since it was first out, and it's probably starting in April and May and June of this year, the state has really built a pretty robust website and continues to add to it. So all of these links will take you to different places within the stated website to talk to you, where you can see the framework. You can see the second two bullets take you to the actual Regents, Board of Regents action that they undertook. The framework briefs that Mr. Core alluded to, those are 6 kind of individual one-pagers about the state's thinking around why the framework is important, how the framework benefits all children, how the framework benefits the students of New York State. So you could read those. The implementation roadmap we showed you just page 1 of, because we're in step 1, or excuse me, phase 1, but that is there. And then I know some people were asking, like, how do you follow like everything that state ed is doing? They have a Twitter account like everybody else in the world, but something that I would suggest is the last link that says NYSED General News. If you go there, there's an archive of everything, but at the bottom, you can actually subscribe, and it says like, keep me posted for the latest from New York State Department of Education. And you can put in your home email address at the bottom of that page, and then you can get the email updates as well. So that's another good source for people who are interested. But all of these are live and active, but the site remains under construction. They continue to add more resources as they continue to do their part, because if we go way back to this, you can see that, yes, the schools, North Colony here, local schools and districts have a role in this phase 1, raising awareness, but so does the State Department of Education. And so you can see that they are working to get interest in and understanding of the framework, as well as OCs and other groups. So all of those links will be posted as well when we post the slides, so that we can see, so that you can have them and you can continue to look at these. I know we did a quick overview tonight, but our goal is, I'm going to go back one more time with apologies. In this phase 1, that for each of the next PACs, we'll do what we're doing right now, which is, let's face it, a real 10,000-foot view, right? Let's just introduce and orient you to the framework. Tonight we did principle 1, The next time we'll do 10,000 foot view, principle 2, 10,000 foot view, principle 3, 10,000 foot view, principle 4. That's the phase 1 of raising awareness and understanding what's in the framework. Once we have that and we kind of, okay, we're orienting ourselves to it for whether that's our internal community of our teachers and administrators or our parent community, then we can start moving into phase 2. Like, okay, now that we sort of have a sense of where it is and where it fits, now let's start getting into more of the documents that the state has provided for us so that we can better understand, okay, exactly what does this mean? So we'll hit all 4 first and an overview, and then we'll start digging in phase 2 to understand more of like, okay, how do we unpack each of these with a little bit more intention? So I'm sure there are some more questions that I can't see. So Mr. Court, I'm going to stop the slide so that we can all see each other.
Yes, and so let me go back to the chat here. I know I missed some points here. James Jeter, thank you very much for your comments throughout here. So let me go back here. Dr. Saida, how great that this leadership is bringing this framework to the forefront in the community, so it hopefully becomes an expectation for school staff and community. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Again, James Jeter, totally agree. Humera, Aisha, I concur. Humera, Kelly Brown, well said. Humera, Karen Meese, yes. Humera, very well said. Peter Gannon, this framework, if executed well, invests in our kids by developing the skills that can't be automated, empathy and creativity, to name a few. Jennifer Karen, the 10,000 view is great and foot view is great. However, there's a lot packed into the document, which I've read, so I'm not sure how far to dive in during this meeting. And when does phase 1 end and how are you measuring success? I think, well, that's a great question. I think we'll measure success by essentially, when we look on our PAC meeting, do we have greater understanding? Do we have greater involvement? And I think also we could perhaps, maybe do some kind of survey to the community to make sure that we do have some understanding, or find out from the community what more they may actually need. Paloma,
I'm sorry, Mr. Gore. I would also say to me, phase one, because for many of our teachers, yesterday was the first time of them really starting to unpack it and think about it. So for phase 1, we certainly want to get through the overview of each of those 4 principles so that we can start to get people learning the language, seeing the framework, understanding the symbols, things like that. So to me, that's all part of the phase 1 introductory work, if you will.
Paloma noted in the chat that, let me just see here. This sounds to me like the expectations that modern workplaces are placing on employees. This will enable our students to succeed in the modern world. Lisa Kennedy, well said. Humera again. Peter, 100% Paloma. We see it every day now. Jennifer, I think there needs to be a survey or town hall for the larger parent community. And I think, we're going to be utilizing a variety of ways to involve the community, including the PAC, and then ultimately, parents in other capacities, even on committees as well. Aisha, yes, Paloma, culturally responsive education is mandated at my place of employment. Humera, let's see. I remember when my kids were at Southgate, the Peaceable School celebrations in school were so unifying for the kids. As this framework builds and grows, the kids will hopefully grow to be a compassionate and understanding adults. So I think, this is emblematic here of the work that we have done in the district here all along. And what we look at it really as an affirmation of work that has been ongoing and current and consistent in the district. I'm proud to say that I've been a part of this community for 41 years. I'm proud to say too that we have not rested on our laurels and that we have constantly moved forward. So this is, another catalyst for that forward movement. So I fully agree to this. And I think, it's important to note too, that this discussion is open to all. These meetings are meetings that are on the live stream. You can participate live. We will memorialize them. The resources are accessible on the website. Tabasum, I agree with Jennifer. Evaluation of success or efforts is very important. Surveys of students, teachers, and parents are a good idea. Thank you. I agree. You both had great ideas. Were surveys to middle school students a part of this framework, or was that separate? I'm not quite sure. Surveys to middle school students. I know that there was a survey that if it's referring to a survey to provide in the beginning of the year to get a sense of where students were at. I think those surveys were a sense there where students could tell something about themselves to the faculty so that the faculty could use that as a resource and guide to get a better understanding of where students were and hopefully be able to serve them and again create an environment that is welcoming and affirming. So in that sense, I think it was very coherent with what the framework would be. I think that that is the message. After listening to this, it was appearing like we don't have compassionate kids, and that's very concerning to me. I think we have extremely compassionate kids, and I am very proud of it. And one of the proud things that I can tell you right now is that, for years, I have walked down the hallways of Shaker High School, and I have seen students, different backgrounds, different faiths, different ethnicities, different abilities. And our students look at that world as this is my world and I accept the people in my world. I'll give you an anecdote here. A couple of years ago, I had lunch with with some of our high school kids, and I asked about bullying, and it was fascinating in the sense here that our students shared with me the notion that that's ridiculous. Why would anybody bully? So they are filled with compassion. And, when each and every one of them are in need, they are ready to help one another. So I am looking this as on a great notion here to build upon on an affirming community that exists. And my daughter is speaking to the importance of affirmation, and she's a 7th grader. Good point. Ian Knox, if you take a pulse of other Capital Region School District, North Colony has been at the forefront of this work, and I applaud the dedication to this work, especially to spending an entire superintendent's conference day on this work. Thank you. Appreciate that, Ian. From Tabasan, my kids were at Bout Hills, and there was a great emphasis on service projects and kids' engagement in community. Action speaks much louder than words, and it helped them to develop empathy and compassion. Thank you, Jennifer. Glad to hear that you say that. I think the same thing, and I don't. I don't think we presented it to indicate that it wasn't happening, but I know for sure that it is.
And if I could just jump in, much of what I reference is from the state education department. So this is their mandate to sort of all schools about, making sure that kids aren't bullying, kids aren't doing this, that, and the other thing. That wasn't saying North Colony isn't, because from whether it's the North Colony Kids Who Care or the examples we see, or the kids cheering on the very last kid who comes in at the elementary track meet, like our kids show up. I think they're amazing, Jennifer. I agree with you. So a lot of that is what the state is putting out there. I think we're really fortunate that we have great communities of awesome kids.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. If you have additional questions, you can submit them to communications.org. It's great to meet with PAC. I greatly appreciate all your participation. We were at 127 viewers at peak. And again, many, many thanks. to everything that you do on behalf of our school and on our students and families. Your service to the PAC is greatly presented and is greatly appreciated. Dr. Saida, thank you very much. I appreciate your kind words. Thank you, Aisha. Let's see, okay. Jenna, not on the topic, but will the lighting on the path from Shaker Middle School to Blue Creek be illuminated once it starts to get darker after 4? I will look into that. Brett, you had a question on COVID? Oh, well,
yeah, someone had asked it earlier. I was just wondering if there are any plans for a VAX clinic.
I've already put my word in with the Albany County Department of Health that we are ready, willing, and able to host a clinic if something comes up. Paloma, thank you. So wonderful for my second grader in kindergarten. We look forward to continue normalcy as the pandemic hopefully ends. Okay, well, again, thank you all very much for your participation. Great to see you all tonight. And Kelly, you're right. There's always room for improvement. We work constantly toward that. And thank you, Kelly Brown, for that comment. Take care, everyone. Have a great evening, and we'll keep you posted. Have a good evening.